Welcome back to another episode of Diabetics Doing Things. We're telling the amazing stories of people with diabetes from all over the world. And I'm psyched for today's episode because this is a longtime friend of the pod. And I'm going to even talk a little bit about our conversation in 2017 because after we hung up, Neil Greathouse is our guest, the Beaties on all the platforms. But you gave me a compliment. I think you were episode 14 or 17 or somewhere around there. And you were like, dude, you need to keep doing this. This is really cool. And I just coming away from that, like from somebody at the time too, like I just really looked up to in the space and still do. And also just really respect you as it from a creative standpoint. That just gave me a ton of really positive feedback. And your friendship over the years means a lot to me and has meant a lot to Diabetics Doing Things. So thank you for being here.
Oh man, thank you. Look at you though. Seriously, what are you 260 episodes after episode 17?
Yeah, so
250, something like that. You're close.
we're crushing it. We've actually done over 300 if you include the tools of type 1.
Oh,
So, we're on this feed. This will be
it's
probably
listen,
270 something.
a lot of times what happens is people, and I think you guys know this, in this space, there are a lot of people that make a big splash for a very short amount of time. They don't do this for the long haul because it can be a grind, but it also the rewarding and the fulfillment part of it only comes over time. It only comes for doing this. And what you're doing is you're building trust. That's what you guys have been doing is building trust over the years. Like I just stood up. I know I told you this in email, but I just stood up at a Type 1 Nation summit, literally with a picture of your faces on the screen. And I said, if you are not listening to this podcast, you're doing the wrong thing. Because there's so many people that are like, they don't know other people with type 1. They don't have anyone in the community. This could be their only real connection. So I'm glad you guys are still doing it. And I think it's growing. So it's not even just like, we're still plugging along. No, you're thriving. So good for you.
Well, thank you. And I think we talk a lot about this in our meetings, but like daily deposits, showing up consistently. Ashley on our team, who is not really public facing a lot, has just been such a huge anchor point for us to continue to grow and like you said, not just chug along, but like grow it and proliferate. But I think also what's interesting, and I love your perspective on this as well, because you are also one of those longstanding diabetes creators. We talk a lot about the plight of a diabetes creator because it takes time to build momentum. It takes time to invest. And if you run into diabetes burnout, if you run into a job change or a big life change, it can be really difficult to find the energy and the time to continue to make diabetes content or contribute whatever your perspective is to the diabetes community. And, so I really feel a lot of, I feel that pain of a diabetes creator. I feel that like, oh man, I had this great idea, I had all this momentum, but I just ran out of resources. I just ran out of time. And so, we're actively working on, because of our position and because of that longevity, we've learned a lot. We do not hit a home run every time we get up to bat. And we've learned a lot. And I think we can help hopefully minimize some of that churn and burnout of diabetes creators because I think the next great diabetes innovation is gonna come from a creator. It's gonna come from
Come on.
somebody like us, somebody like our listeners. Like maybe they're out there listening to it. Maybe they're a Risley Health student. Maybe they just don't know yet that they have, what everybody is looking for. And I just want to be a part of making space for the next great diabetes innovation from a creator.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Why not them? Like, why
why
not? Like,
not?
why's it got to be? Yeah.
Why
Why
not?
not? Yeah. Yep. I think people severely underestimate what can be done over the long haul, but they overestimate what can be done in a short amount of time. And it takes a little while. Yeah. Oh,
Big
yeah.
time.
Looking back, like yesterday was 32 years for me. And I went back. You said like been doing it a long time. The very first video I ever posted was 2008. I look back at that, like I looked like a small child. Like, what in the world? I had no facial hair, weird glasses, hair is just totally weird. And it was just a YouTube video that I put out there. But then to continue doing that for a long time, to be fair, Instagram used to be 15 seconds. You can do anything somewhat decent for 15 seconds and not be an absolute bore, but it's gotten different now. I mean, there's so much time you have. You're like, well, I'd rather keep it short. Like that's where I've tried to limit myself on keep it as short as possible because if you go too long, it's just boring. Nobody wants that.
And diabetes is pretty complex, as
Yeah.
we know.
Yeah. Yeah. for sure.
Well, let's see, like, so your Eritrea is 23 years last week.
Mhm.
You're 32 years yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm 19 years, so I'm the junior statesman here. I'm here to learn from both of you guys, but we've got, going on 70 years of people living with diabetes just in this one podcast. So you talked about longevity, thousands of years of life experience on this feed. And, I continue to learn new things every day. I was thinking today, I was trying to count carbs for a chicken salad sandwich, but the bread of the sandwich was a croissant, which we know is a little flaky and a little
Mhm.
bit different.
Yeah.
So, there's always going to be a challenge out there. There's always going to be, diabetes is always going to throw a left turn in you there somewhere. So grateful to continue to learn from amazing folks.
I think
Yeah.
it's funny that you said you've had diabetes for 32 years. Can last time that you were on the pod, you said 26 years and 17 days. Do you have the days and the months and all? You used to have like this. Yeah. Do you still have that?
I'd still literally have the app because
Oh,
every
really?
time I post, I put what year it is and what day it is, and I had to get the paid version of it, which is ridiculous because I don't wanna do the math for myself, but I have a countdown of yeah, it's right there. So 32 years, 1 day right there. So
Cool.
it
That's really interesting that we're hitting basically the anniversary of you living with diabetes for such a long time. That's
I
fun.
remember your story. Like Eritrea has some great show notes in here for us, but I remember you were an aviator in the military, and
yes.
they gave you the option, like, drive a garbage truck or, like, get discharged, and you were like, "Hey, no disrespect to sanitation, but I need to get
Yeah.
out of here."
Well, there were 2 options they gave me, garbage truck or bus driver. And so no disrespect for either of those, but I just said, "That's not what I didn't sign up for that." And I don't even think I'm gonna be really good at it. I don't like germs. So I was like, "Nah, I'm out." Yeah, yeah, those that was the career path. I was talking with somebody today. It's like the fault line cracked and shifted, and so the path veered off from there drastically. I love what I'm doing now. Didn't think I would ever choose this. Like not in a million years would I have gone this direction. I had other dreams, but I love what I'm doing now.
Well, I think,
Sorry.
like, the Pinterest quote, right, is that life is, 10% what happens to you and
Yeah.
90% how you respond, and I think, like, not and again, Eritrea knows this, like, I'm a big mindset guy, and I have to really, like, check myself most times that there are other things besides mindset that impact what you do, but that I think, to our point about diabetes creators, none of us knew this was going to happen to us, and we respond and how we respond and how we deal with that really is just kind of our own personal choice, right? We get to connect with other people. Like you said, many people are walking around, maybe listen to this podcast and don't have people with diabetes that they can just skip all the exposition and explanation and just connect with over blood sugars or croissant carb counts or,
Flaky, real
pulling the
flaky.
diabetes card.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
And so we get the benefit of, just being able to connect with people on a different level. And for me personally, you are a big part of that, of like, my close friends with diabetes who I can talk to if I ever needed to about whatever diabetes related.
yeah.
So
Same. Same.
Something that you guys were talking about when we were opening the episode is that when you first started, when you came onto the pod, the show was so different. First of all, I was not here. I was not part of this conglomerate. It was a one-man program.
Yeah.
So when I got to listen to the content for the first time, I feel like I heard it, but I don't know, like I got to re-know you and the things that I've gotten from your content since I discovered you on TikTok. Like I feel that I discovered your content, but no, it's so interesting to me that a diagnosis completely changed your career path because you went to school later on for computer science and then you got diagnosed and then it was like, okay. And now we're looking in the future. What is it like 6 years since you came on the pod? And now are you a full time content creator work in diabetes person?
Yeah.
That's
So yeah, yeah. I work for Risley Health. I'm a health
okay.
coach and help out with marketing for them as well. And I do a lot of contract work for some pretty large diabetes, either tech companies or pharmaceutical companies, whatever is out there. But then the majority of the time that I spend is trying to help educate people. It's this fine line between educate and encourage, maybe inspire. I guess would be a little bit about it. Like it's probably actually more acknowledged and understood, I think, is probably part of what I'm trying to do. So if you split out a
mm.
week and I have 7 posts that come out, it's gonna be a balance between those. But yeah, that's what I'm doing now full time.
That's such a jump. And it's also very interesting. Well, for people, for myself, who used to have a normal computer science job and now works full time in diabetes, it's interesting to see, and also, I guess, hopeful, that there could be longevity to this career of helping shape the diabetes world around us. Or do you find that it's still like a huge obstacle? Like, are you out there like hunting and foraging, or is it like the work just kind of comes?
Um, it moves as fast as the relationships do. Like, that's really where the trust is built and relationships. Like, I've had the privilege recently of helping out on the tandem team do some of the content creation and promotion for the Moby pump. That only came about because of a great relationship with Blair Ryan and some of their team at Tandem, and just always connecting, like always staying connected and developing those relationships. You never know when the next one's gonna come out there, but I'll say this, it hasn't been easy, that's for sure. Like, none of that is easy because you have to keep the flywheel moving. So, if I were to just take my foot off the gas pedal, this thing would eventually run out, like it would stop, that stuff would stop. So you do have to keep going. I don't that doesn't frustrate me. Like, I enjoy doing this. So if there were no other companies that were out there doing, I would still do this just because of the engagement with real people that know I'm not trying to sell them anything. It's
You're
probably
just
the
doing
biggest, like,
yeah.
I'm trying not to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm trying to walk with you. I'm not trying to influence you. I'm trying to help be somebody that is in it with you.
It reminds me of that movie, the was it called The Boiler Room, Rob, where the guy's like that Ben Affleck movie, and instead of always be closing, it's always be connecting, I guess, is the Neil
Uh,
Greathouse takeaway.
Yeah, man, first of all, Boiler Room, great movie,
yeah, good reference. That's like, oh,
iconic
that good.
Ben Affleck reference. You want details? Fine. I drive a
One of
Ferrari,
my game stays.
365, yeah, like, great movie, highly recommend. Young Vin Diesel too, Vin Diesel with hair, if you wanna see that.
Oh gosh.
Um, but I wanna talk a little bit about that because we've talked about longevity, we've talked about consistency, we've talked about your kinda content creation, and I feel very similar. Like if I stopped, like eventually this will go away. Like there will be someone else that either replaces me or it goes moves in a different direction, whatever the case. I don't do it because of that. I do it because continued renewed sense of finding that person at the right time, connecting them to the resources that they need. And I've seen the talk about flywheel, the hockey stick up in the relationship with diabetes and the diabetes management by finding the right people in the community and getting connected to them. And I wanna go back a little bit to about a year ago, a little over a year ago, where you set out to make a video with about diabetes on TikTok every day, so
Yes.
365 videos, which as I didn't know you were doing that ahead of time, but I started seeing these videos, I was like, "Neil is grinding. He is putting these out. He's back," because early on, you were, again, making those 15-second videos. That's how I got introduced to you. And I was like, "Yes, Neil is back. There's a new video algorithm. There's a new platform, but it's still same Neil." Really high quality information wrapped in a very funny and relatable package, which I always just find so great about you. So walk us through like the ideation of that and the commitment to do one of those, every day and what you learn from it.
Oh, okay. How it actually came about is I posted a YouTube video with no edits maybe 3 weeks before I started that process of every day. And it was just me. I'm sitting in my garage. I set up a camera and I just kind of vented for a little bit because diabetes was really tiring. It wasn't like I was like burned out. I was just tired. I was like so tired of it. And I was verbalizing where I realized that it started getting more tiring, started to get a little heavier, is almost all of what I was doing was focused on me. And so the shift started there. I about 2 weeks later had, I don't know if I think I got like bronchitis or something like that. And I had to get one of those steroid shots. And of course, it messed with my blood sugar. And so I just made a video about that because I thought that if other people don't know that this can raise their blood sugar, I'll do something. And the response was pretty. I hadn't really left the space, but I just hadn't done anything super consistent. You know what I mean? Like, just there was no real drive or motivation. And that video, it did something for me to remember that there are brand new people in this space that don't know any of this. And even if they saw a video I did on this 3 or 4 years ago, they're brand new to this platform. They're brand new to diabetes. I mean, how many people every year are diagnosed? You know, we're at like
Yeah, like
1.89 million in the US. Like, okay,
they say what JDRF numbers are like 40,000,
yep,
give or take, every year just in the US.
just
It's
here.
not
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So I made the decision that day and I just started mapping it out while I was doing it. So I wrote a month ahead. And then after I got done with that month, I wrote, okay, I'll write 3 months ahead. Then I started going by quarter. And so I mapped out what I wanted to accomplish in a year, some very difficult topics. Diabetes burnout was one of them. But I also realized this, Rob, I don't have to be the expert on all of this. I could feature other people that are the experts or that can have some expertise. I just need to show empathy. They can show the expertise. And so I started featuring other people on there. You were on there. Lauren was on there. There were a bunch of people that jumped on and started showing. And so I built that out for a year, covering all those topics, covered the cost of insulin, like right in the middle of that whole big, that whole big Twitter thing that happened, and really broke it down in 90 seconds, 60 seconds a day. Here's why these things are happening. And then here's why these, things raise your blood sugar. Here's why things lower your blood sugar. And the response was kind of shocking. I don't think I expected that kind of response, but it's so much work to write, research, film, edit, post, respond. Like, that's the other thing. I'm not just putting this out there in the ether and saying, good luck with that. Like, if they have questions, I want them to realize this is a real human being. And then a couple times in there, just saying, look, I don't need anything from you. I'm not, I'm not pitching anything for you. I'm just here because I wish I had this a lot longer ago. Like, how often do we see our doctor? Now, how often do you go see your endo? Like, legitimately? Twice,
Once
Yeah.
every
3
3
times a year?
months. I think it's different for everybody. We did a poll once, remember, Rob? And it was like once every 3 months for me, same for you, and
Okay.
other people were like 90 days or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, like, some people's insurance, like, won't cover it more than twice a year, or,
Right.
it really just depends on your situation, and also, like, some endocrinologists don't wanna see you every 6 months, like, they
Right. Right. Yeah.
or every 3 months. They're like, "Hey, you kinda got it, like, we're good," or, whatever they look like, but I think, like, minimum a year, but again, 1 day a year for something that you're thinking about 100 times a day?
Yeah. So
I think it Go ahead, bro.
oh,
Sorry.
well, it's like that's what this was kind of born out of, is if you get a sum total of 35 to 40 minutes in a year with the one healthcare professional that can help you, it's probably not enough. So maybe we could create something that's just a little drip every day. Maybe they learn something. Maybe they already knew it. Maybe it's a reminder. I forgot things about protein and fat and carbs. I mean, you just forget them over time. That's where it came from.
I think it's really great that you mentioned, like, how you realized how the thought process of creating the content began, because though I found your content randomly, like, so I didn't even know that you and Rob were friends. So for her, there was a minute that I was like, "Hey, Rob, there's this guy on the internet. He's really great." And I was like, "This guy," and he was like, "Yeah, I know him. Like, this is my friend." I was just like, "Oh, well," because
Yeah.
I there was a point in time where I had noticed that you were using, I think it's the 42 factors from Adam Brown that
Mhm.
impact diabetes, that Diatribe champions isn't, big deal. And I thought it was so cool that you'd found a way, I made it our social over there. And I thought it was really cool that you'd taken our content and found a way to make it way more digestible and fun and interesting. Like, yes, talk to me about lack of sleep and how that impacts my blood sugars, because I didn't know that, for the longest time until Rob told me. So I think it's a different way of getting information from a friend with diabetes in your pocket in a way. I don't know, but it's very interesting to me that you got to do that. And the question becomes, Neil Greathouse, how do you speak Gen Z? I know. So, like, how do you speak that? How are you doing that?
Who somebody asked me this recently. They said, you don't do a lot of the trends, you don't do a lot of these the audio or the whatever. Uh, I know who I am. I can make fun of myself enough, and I think authenticity is will carry over from one generation to another. Because look at it. Look, there's like, what's that guy's name on TikTok? I don't know. He's like your dad on TikTok, giving you advice about things you didn't know, like changing the air filter in your car or whatever. And he's blowing up over there. Just be yourself. How do I do it? I'll be like, if my kids call me later on and tell me like, "Dad, you're this is dumb." Like, okay, I'll back off. Like, they're really a good filter for me, but I have enough self-awareness to realize I'm not gonna go out there and dance. I'm not gonna do some of these other things, and those are great, and I think there are people that can, and let them do that. I can do the one thing that I can do. So yesterday I posted in my stories all of these old Diversity videos that I had done. I was unhinged. Like, you guys, going back to like 2014, 2015, I put my face in a cake and like sang a song on my Diversity like 8 years ago. So yeah, just so we're clear, like I've over time I've started to realize like who I am, what can I get away with, what I can't, and I just need to be authentic to myself. I'm not
This
gonna
I'm glad to hear this because I believe that content is truly the most real chronic illness,
yeah,
and it affects so many of us, and so
yeah.
just to know, like, hey, guys, it's not always these really polished, great TikTok videos. At one point, even Neil was putting his face in a cake
Mhm.
for the algorithm. We've all been there. We've
Yeah,
all done it.
yeah, oh yeah,
Oh my
I've done it.
god, you guys have no shame.
You
I
None.
can't
was
you
you
cannot
can't
have shame
waterboard that out of me. Like I
well, like, when you're putting yourself out there, though, on the internet, you kinda have to like Neil said, like, you never know which videos are gonna strike a particular nerve and, like, open you up to whether it's positive sentiment or engagement or sometimes negative or misunderstanding. Like you said, explaining really complicated, complex healthcare topics in 90 seconds is not easy.
Yeah,
And you kinda have to have no shame with this, like, you have to be willing to put yourself out there to try something, learn from it, adjust, move on, but I think I wanna, in this conversation, just admit we shared this last year transparently on the podcast about events. Like, if you think that this is all going super smooth and behind the scenes, like, everyone's saying yes to us all the time, and there's no challenges or anything that come up, like, let me dispel that because this is hard and takes vulnerability and commitment to doing stuff that's a little bit uncomfortable.
yeah. Yeah, very, very much so. Like you said, you don't know which ones are going to get backlash. You don't know which ones are going to get praise or engagement or whatever. So if the one thing that I can control is that I'm never going to cross that line, but also I am going to push myself in. Somebody told me a long time ago, like, be real with everybody, but be transparent with a few. Every once in a while, the things that do really well is when we are transparent on social media, and those are the ones that are difficult to post because you're not sure how it's going to go because you're like, you know, this didn't go well, or this was super frustrating, or that I messed up. Like I made a big mistake here. Those are the ones that actually end up doing really, really well.
I agree, and I think, like, I remember having conversations with you around, like, that particular time, like, when everyone was very online, there was a lot of, like, especially around, diabetes content and around the insulin crisis and all of these sort of different opinions coming through, and I remember having, like, very transparent, like, very vulnerable conversations of like, "Hey," of speaking for you in this case, like, I was trying to do something good to help people understand what was happening, and unfortunately, people sort of turned this back on me like I was doing something wrong. I don't understand it, help me out, and I think in those times, like, I was just really grateful to have somebody else to talk to about that because at that point, I was also dealing with a lot of like, trying to navigate what the right thing to do, and like what you said, I know who I am, and I know what I believe, and I haven't taken the content Hippocratic oath, but, like, I operate that way, like, first, do no harm, like,
Right.
first, like, make sure that we're doing the right thing always, and I just found myself kinda upside down, like, I thought I was doing the right thing here, I don't know where the disconnect is, like, help me out, and I didn't really have anyone to go to, so it was nice to have that conversation with you at that time.
Yeah. Helps to be able to talk to somebody else who's also dealing with it. Like that's just the reality. Is I was dealing with it too, for sure. Yep.
Yeah, so I wanna shift in, like, you made a couple videos actually after you completed your year of diabetes videos, and they were, like, built around learnings, and one in particular is something that I have experienced and noticed because I think you and I also have, like, the marketing strategist brain kind of always going in the background, and so we notice things about videos and about topics that maybe not everybody does. And one that you had expressed in your one of your recap videos was that videos about hypoglycemia and low blood sugars and any sort of like anxiety or fear around those always performed better than videos, the average. And I also experienced this on videos like about hyperglycemia or any sort of like diabetes distress or insurance troubles or kinked sites or delivery issues or whatever the case may be. any kind of like video like that or content like that seems to outperform. And so the insight there would be like, well, I'm just going to post more content like this, except, you obviously don't want to be
Right, right.
optimizing your diabetes for hyperglycemia. So I don't know, what were some of the other things that were interesting to you that stood out about the data you gathered and the experience you gathered from your year?
Ooh, the most vocal and sometimes underappreciated people group were caregivers. I did not realize how passionate they are, how exhausted they are, how desperate they can be, but also how supportive they are of each other. Because I've never sat in that seat. I've been around them, but I did a bunch of posts in a row and just realized, my gosh, what a force of nature that group of people can be, but also what the need was. That's one thing that stood out to me, the caregiver side of, I mean, I'm living with type 1, like my wife has different thoughts about it entirely, her side of it, her perspective of it. But like parents, grandparents, babysitters, spouses, they have a different thing that they have to carry. That one. And then there are some pretty obvious things you could do in type 1 diabetes in this space that will get you likes, comments, whatever. And I just decided not to go there. It's like kind of like what you said about what, and this is social media in general. This is any kind of content in general. The negative side of things gets a massive response fast, but it has an equally large and rapid fall off of staying power. Good, positive, encouraging, or educational or affirming content has a slower rise, but lasts longer over time. And so I just made the decision that I wasn't going to do it. But man, you see people come out of the woodwork, like what you said, on some of those lows, highs, all kind of stuff. And some of it is this: they want someone else to verbalize what is difficult for them because they don't want to be the one that's complaining about it. So when you say something about a low or a hypo or a hyper or something like that that's difficult, you are really projecting out there for everybody else. And they're going, yeah, that's me. And they'll repost that all day long because it's not them saying it, it's you saying and reaffirming what they are afraid to say. That's not bad. It's just I can't do that all day, every
All the
day. I'd
time.
rather have the longer lasting impact over time. Um,
It kind of comes back to me, like ultimately, and I think this is, my jokes about content as a chronic disease come from this. Like most people want to be seen as they are, they want to be heard, and they often don't have an outlet in their personal life where that's possible. And
oof.
so, like you're saying, if I see something that I agree with, and I think this is one of the challenges of social media algorithms in general, is I call it enrage and engage because you'll often see these accounts that will just say things to try to get a rise out of people. And so they'll either share it or they'll comment or they'll take some sort of engagement. And then that will cause the loop back to the flywheel. You mentioned flywheels. You and I are just we go to the same marketing church, I think. Is, you okay, now the algorithm is just going to feed you more controversial content so that you react and you're just going to become more and more miserable because you're just contributing to this. And I think many people, especially of a certain demographic, don't realize that the platforms are optimized to do that to them and that they don't realize what fallout is coming to them because of those actions. And it's very manipulative and it's very, in a lot of ways discouraging to me of like how the platforms work that way because then it also sends a negative feedback loop to the creators or
Mm,
saying, okay, well, if you want this content to do well, this is the type of stuff that you need to make.
yep.
And then that flywheel continues to turn.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting. Like it's important to be seen. It's important to be affirmed and to share, sometimes the most shared diabetes messages are memes because people
Mhm.
feel that, that
Yeah.
we all have felt the way that we see those visualized. And there are amazing accounts that contribute to that stuff. And so it's just an interesting balance. And I think for somebody who was so open with that journey over and created so much content over a long period of time, to hear that like data aggregation was super interesting to me.
Yeah. I wrote this down. I didn't say this. I didn't come up with this, but I literally wrote this quote down today. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. And a lot of people are processing through what we're posting with that lens. They're identifying or latching on or connecting. So yeah, yeah, learned a lot. learned a lot over a year. I mean, in that year, I made 400 videos. Like, it's just, I don't like the sound of my own voice anymore. I can't, it's like I annoy myself. My family's like, Dad, are you doing another one?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, like, here we go, still going." It's kind of funny because you do really get used to pushing past some of those boundaries. You're like, I'm going to do it because I committed to this, but I think it's also helping somebody. At least I hope it is.
Two things I want to talk about. One, I heard a quote recently to tag on to a quote that we've said on this podcast before. We don't see them as they are, we see them as we are. The only thing I can do for you is work on myself.
Mm,
The only thing you can do for me is work on yourself.
yeah.
And I think like so much of that is, we're existing in this world as ourselves, and how we perceive things says more about us than it does anyone
Yeah.
else. And that's hard. Like we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard. On the other hand, so another creator, massive creator, Mr. Beast, popular quote of his is for anyone wanting to become a content creator, make 100 videos. All of them will suck, but something will happen at the 101st video
Yeah.
that you'll have learned something, you'll have changed something, your process will be more dialed in, you'll have a perspective that's different. So you are already an accomplished filmmaker, content creator, marketer before you started this, and then you added 400 videos to your reel in less more than one video per day, right? In that time frame. What did you learn? What did you look at as you look at video 400 compared to video number 1? Whether it's process, whether it's, like you said, being tired of your own voice, ideation, like what did you learn about you and your process and your videos from that time?
There's a this is a motto or a theme that I live by, and it showed up in this process. It's show, don't tell. So many people are told how to live, how to function with type 1, but very few of us have someone showing us how to do it. And more people learn by seeing someone else do it and be there alongside them than someone saying, "Do this list of things." Oh gosh, I actually heard this from a CDCES in Columbus, Ohio, and they said that they were joking around with their endo is very, very difficult on them, like hard on them, very difficult. And she said, "Feel free to say back to your endo if they are being too rough on you about your numbers or whatever. Do you think you could do better than I am doing right now?" I was like, "Oh gosh, okay," because it's easy to get this list of things that you have to do, but it's so different to actually have to do it. So that's the biggest thing that I learned is people want someone to show them, not tell them. That's the major takeaway out of if I could boil down a year plus, it would come down to that.
Strong. It's amazing how like improv and theater and all these like kind of principles like show, don't tell, just like keep popping up in everyday life.
Yeah, it's
Really important stuff. I I want to spend some time on this because this is a from Eritrea's notes preparing for the episode and kind of revisiting some of our thoughts from years ago now. The idea of the diabetes card and playing it to get out of certain things. So Eritrea, do you want to talk a little bit about like because I also go on both sides of this where I think it's super important to have accommodations. I think it's super important to have the Americans with Disabilities Act and 504 plans to get out of things. But I don't really abide by those in my everyday life. Like I give very little grace to myself to like, oh, if I'm having a low blood sugar before a meeting, like I'm just gonna treat it and go to the meeting. I'm not making I typically don't make the excuse. I talked about this recently on the podcast. Like I've only really one time taken myself out of a meeting for diabetes, and I had ketones and my insulin site had been kinked for 3+ hours, and I was like on the verge of hospitalization. So like it took a lot. Like the red alert alarms were going off before I even was like, hey, maybe I should like give myself some help here. So I want to talk with you about the diabetes card and also let Eritrea guide us through this because a lot of this I think comes back to my just like psycho athlete mentality where I just do whatever the situation is, I'm going to do it regardless of how I feel.
I well, first of all, when I wrote this, I was having an Io Adibri moment. Like, so Io Adibri is a comedian who recently was talked about something she said on a podcast a long time ago about Jennifer Lopez, and then she had to go and co-host SNL with Jennifer Lopez. And I thought that this is a great. I was like, I'm gonna do that to Neil Greathouse because
Oh,
I have
great.
questions. Because I went back and I listened to your episode, and you mentioned that people who use type 1 diabetes as a card to get out of things are wrong. Like a gym class. You're like, just take the class. Like, just do it. And maybe a hit dog's gonna holler, as we say in Texas, but I played the diabetes card in high school because I didn't want to take gym. Like, I just simply did not want to do it. And so I used my 504 to not take it. And my parents were like, yes, cheat the system because the system cheats you every day.
Yeah.
So sometimes I just don't want to go to a freaking gym class. So why, like, what? I guess I wanted to really understand what's your problem, Neil?
Oh, man. Well, I'm glad this is a therapy session now. I'm glad I'm here for this. I'm going to lay
This
down
is
on the
what it's all
couch.
about.
So how do you feel about that, Neil? Okay, so in all reality, what that probably should say is this: don't lie about what type 1 diabetes is making you incapable of doing. Just don't use that. Don't stretch the truth to your advantage. Like, yeah, get the card to go to all the national parks. Yes. Getting onto an airplane, going through TSA and all those things, all the extras that you get. Of course, you can take advantage of those. I will be honest with you, I rarely do. I don't know why. I just still rarely do. It's like I think I'm going to be found out or somebody's going to roll their eyes at me. I was getting onto a plane recently and I had just heard from an ADA lawyer that she said you can go early onto the plane when they say if you need special assistance. I'm in my head rationalizing, I think I need special assistance, but I don't want to be in main boarding group 5. Is that really what I want to do? And so I went up on main boarding group 2 and I was ready to have the conversation. I was so nervous and she didn't say a thing, beeped me and let me go through. I was like sweating. Oh, I have diabetes, so I need to get access to my stuff. Really? Do I really? No, not really. So like if that bending the truth, that I'm not a fan of. If you genuinely can't do it, okay, then type 1 is there for you. And I don't think you should have to do it. But I just don't like it when we use it as a crutch for something we don't want to do. Sorry.
Okay.
Or that there are times people want to get out of meetings or family functions, or I don't want to hang out with those friends. I'm sorry, my blood sugar was really high yesterday or whatever. I mean, that, like, okay. But the problem is, so in the real basis of that frustration is you're actually painting our inability to function. And that bugs me. I know we're supposed to have friends come over tonight and we're supposed to hang out and watch a show together or whatever, but my blood sugar was really messed up a couple days ago. Like, is that really stopping you from hanging out with friends? Just because you don't want to hang out with the friends, just say that as opposed to using it as a crutch. That's probably what I should have said back on episode 17.
No, that's okay. I
I
think I understood that from what you said. I just still think that I disagree. I still
It's
now
okay.
because I similarly was in a situation where I got on a plane with a friend who also has diabetes. We both have type 1. We were coming back from Alaska. And I do board priority. And there was a woman who was boarding in front of us who was like on crutches. And my friend was like, I feel so bad right now, Eritrea. Why are you making this board priority? And then once we sat down, everybody on the plane, and I was just like, she on the plane the same as us. Like, it didn't make a difference. If I can get something out of a system, like a journey that is mentally taxing to me in some ways, I'm going to. So I get that. And I also see your argument of being like, hey, I don't want people to perpetuate diabetes as a disease where I am unable to function in certain functions. But my overall thought here is that just because it's not taxing the Neil Greathouse if he had a low during lunchtime to go out for dinner with friends, doesn't mean that it wouldn't be taxing to Eritrea Musa or
Yeah.
to Rob or to whoever. So diabetes isn't a monolith, and when we label it that way, it's dangerous. But in the episode, I also want to say you do acknowledge that, and you say that you're on a soapbox, and you have to be really careful here, and
Yeah.
Rob pushes you. So go back and listen to the episode if you want to, friends. But
Yeah.
I need to
it
go
was
back and
just
visit that just because I
it
need
was
to
me
revisit. Like,
nitpicking at this because I think sometimes we lean into toxic, not on purpose, but like this toxic masculine energy of like, yes, this happened to me, but I still have to do this. And
Mhm.
sometimes I don't want to stand up. I want to lay down, dog, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
okay. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, there's sometimes it makes me lay down. Like,
yeah,
there's sometimes I shouldn't push through it, and I don't know why I
yeah,
am, to be totally honest with you. I'm just really stubborn about it. Like, I'm not gonna let this stop me, and it probably should have. probably should have. So I think it's different for everybody. For
Yeah.
me, that's something I battle. Like I think about this all the time.
I do too. I think like, why am I this way?
Who made me
Like
that? Who
why
hurt me?
uh
But no, no,
and at the
no.
same time,
No,
like
it's a
what it
positive. We need people like you guys. We need villains like you, said Scarface. But
I
but
do think though, I wanna tap back for a second though, because it, Neil spoke about something like the honesty aspect of like what is true. And like I think what's really that it takes courage to be honest about ourselves and how we're feeling. I think sometimes diabetes is a especially for in these situations that we're talking about, because it's real and because the accommodations are there. Sometimes it's easier to say diabetes is keeping me from doing something than it is to say, "You know what, dude, I don't really want to go out to lunch with you."
Yeah, yeah,
Because like that can be hurtful and like it opens up other things. But again, like kind of comes back to what Neil was talking about earlier about like knowing who you are, and like the diabetes is a part of who you are. It is not a monolith. I'm gonna name drop here because I'm that guy. But like when we did Diabetes Legends, we were driving back from the gym with Gary Forbes, and he and I were talking about the mindset of diabetes and how important it is, and how our background as athletes, especially in extremely cutthroat, competitive, like upper echelon, prepared us for when like things don't go our way with diabetes, and like having to adjust and not having anyone that you could say like, "Oh, I'm blaming it on this." Like, if you did that in a pro basketball scenario, like, no one gives a shit. Sorry for cursing parents listening, but, like, they don't care. There's somebody else who's willing to do what you wouldn't do right behind you, and so I think that some of that comes to me and to Gary, and maybe you, Neil, as well, of, like, thinking of like you said, you have to keep showing up and doing this, or else it's not gonna happen anymore. Eventually, there will be someone else that does it, so I do think there's a little bit of, like, that scarcity in those, like, masculine kinda, like, have to do these types of things, but what it comes back down to is, again, is courage. It takes real courage to say, "I don't wanna hang out with you today because I don't feel like it." And, like, that's like a
yeah,
radical thing today,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it would be awesome to have it's like a really great back pocket thing to have diabetes to blame for something, because then the other person doesn't take it personally.
yeah. Yeah, what I
mm,
don't want them to
interesting.
do is I don't want them to go, "Really? Is that
Right?
re"
Because
Or
then when you really need it.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah,
or when
I
it has
don't
to be like, "I'm sorry, feel bad." I don't know, I guess it does take more courage to be like, "I just don't have the emotional capacity to hang out. I don't want to," whatever it
yeah,
might be. Interesting. So since we're talking about things that you said on that episode,
great.
in that episode, you also say, and I quote, "Do not wear your type 1 diabetes as a badge. No one is against you." Do you still feel that way in 2024?
No,
Okay, let's
no.
unpack.
I I wanna touch on this too, because I think what we're kinda getting on is, like, thoughts become words, words become actions. So, are we putting ourselves in a box if we give ourselves permission to not do things because of the hands that we've been dealt? No one chose this. We'd all give it back if we could, right? So,
Return to sender.
yeah, exactly. I think we all like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
That was one of my first like hot takes. So somebody asked like, "Hey, would you give it back?" I'm like, "Yeah,
yeah,
for
right
sure.
now.
Right now, take it back. It's all good. We can podcast about other stuff." And Neil and I often do. So I do wanna say, like, it's interesting revisiting this, and I would love to, because I didn't listen to the episode all the way through, because I, too hate the sound of my own voice, and in those days, I was recording through my MacBook Pro, microphone,
Okay.
through this, like, really convoluted web of recording software, and so my voice sounds terrible, but I need to go revisit. I'm gonna put it on the car when I go home today, because I wanna see this, because I think there is power to the badge of diabetes. And I also, in that conversation with Gary, was like, I strive to not always be a mindset guy because of the reasons that we talked about just now. Like for some people, a low blood sugar, a hypoglycemic event, even one that's not severe by like medical standards, knocks you out for 3 to 4 hours.
Mhm.
Dude, it knocks me out for the day. I'm gonna be real. If I have a bad low, I don't wanna talk to anybody for the rest of the day. Leave me the fuck alone. Like, leave me alone. And that's just who I am.
Yeah.
I've canceled recordings of this podcast. I've canceled meetings with Rob because I don't wanna look at you right now, dog. I'm gonna cuss you out. And that's not gonna be productive for you or for me. And that's my emotional and mental capacity. But I don't feel bad about it. And I wear that proudly. I do
Well,
feel
but I
bad
also don't
now though,
punish you for it.
because he
So
got,
like,
yeah, I mean, it's fine. I'll take the punishment. But the thing is, I feel bad for Neil because he got Black History Month menace Eritrea listening to that episode. I'm so sorry.
I'm here
That's just the
for it.
version
I'm here for it.
I got. No, but
Look,
I do
look.
want to talk about not wearing it as a badge because there's so many movements specifically now. I don't even think it's specific to you, but like there are so many. We've taken a pledge to end stigma at Diabetics Doing Things. So is everybody else because now it's like this whole conversation about how because in the episode, just to give context to you, if you guys don't remember, you're talking about how like Jimmy Fallon doesn't hate people with diabetes just because he makes a late night joke, and other people who make like small social commentary around diabetes, like it doesn't really impact us, and there's bigger battles. But now there's all these pharma funded stigma fighting stuff, which is it? Do those jokes harm us healthcare wise or not? That's the conversation for us.
Yeah, I think wearing it as a badge, I just don't think there should be any shame to it. I do know people who wear it for attention versus a badge. There is like if you press my fingers hard enough, the holes from where I stuck my fingers will still bleed. We all have scars. Those are a badge of honor that we are doing something that is difficult. I say this all the time. You're not doing a bad job. You're doing a difficult job. What we are doing has built resilience in us. And it does mean that we're doing the difficult things. And the fact that we just celebrated, you guys as well, a diversary, it's another year of doing the hard work. Yes, wear that as a badge
No
all day long.
breaks.
Yep, all day long.
Interesting.
Not for attention. 'Cause I think that's a difference, and that might be what I was trying to say back then. I don't know, but I will say there are people who do that, and I feel like you're kind of giving us a bad rap for that.
You're making us look bad.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
Well, I
doing the
think
Kevin
too,
Hart.
like,
No, I'm just kidding.
you know, yeah, I remember my perspective on those jokes, like at the time, especially, was more of like the comedic perspective of like, this is a low, like, percentage joke
yep,
in any way.
Lazy.
Like, yeah, lazy, like whether it was based in stigma or not, it's like you could probably challenge yourself as a comedian to make a funnier reference
right,
uh, and to kind of get out of those stereotypes. If it was a stereotype about Black people or a stereotype about Hispanic people, like you would recognize quicker why that was not a high percentage choice.
right.
And I think that's what's interesting to me about the stigma campaigns and the pledge that we took to end diabetes stigma, which was okay, cool. At least there's awareness now that there is a lot of diabetes information that's rooted in stigma, and shame is a big part of stigma. So, what we should collectively do, especially in the type 1 community, include people with type 2 in our struggle. They are testing, they probably can squeeze their fingers and blood will still come out. They're still injecting themselves. They're still dealing with insurance challenges.
Right.
And
Like
even if it weren't
one
doing those
one is
things,
not better than the other.
even if they weren't doing those things, they deserve respect
Right,
and
yeah,
honor
Yeah.
because
100%.
all people with disabilities do. Yeah, no,
Yes.
I think my whole question, I guess it just got me thinking about how like maybe we used to think that those jokes and that talking like that, it's like that thing you're always saying Rob, about how important it is how you talk to yourself. So it's like, oh, those jokes around diabetes that people were making. I remember a time when type 1 would just other themselves from those jokes. Oh, those jokes aren't about us. Those jokes are
Mm.
about other people with diabetes. But now we're under all this huge umbrella, so we kinda have to fight the stigma together, and I'm down to do that, I
We
just have
changed the intro to the show. It used to be we're telling the amazing stories of people with type 1 diabetes all around the world. Now it's people with diabetes. We took the distinction out
Yeah,
because why not?
yeah, agreed,
Better together.
agreed.
Okay, Neil, I know we're at time. We got to let you go to your next call. But I wanted you to share one final thing. Like we're talking about shame and stigma for you in your life with diabetes. Forget the concept, forget all of that. When do you remember a time where you felt either othered or like uncomfortable or in a situation where your diabetes drew attention to you in a negative way that you felt really at the time like was different than just other times? I don't know that sticks out to you. And I'm sorry for putting you on the spot with very little time left.
No. I think if there have been times where I feel like I've been made uncomfortable is in scenarios where people think they know or understand what type 1 is, and then they project on you what you are able to do or not able to do. And that's not like an easy answer, but in those scenarios where people automatically limit you because of what you have, when in the back of my head I want to go, you don't have a clue. what this is or whatever. And so you've just placed a guardrail up on what I can and can't do. And that's just not right. Like those things do happen to me. There are people, they just make assumptions is really what it comes down to. Assumptions that can be frustrating, but I know a lot of them are well-meaning, but then there are other people that are not well-meaning. Those are the ones that bug me.
It's uncomfortable. And I think too, there's so much, like you said, it's so much exposition. There's so much information. How in one conversation are you going to get them to see your point of view?
Nope.
And I think a lot of times I myself will just kind of like, all right, I'm going to opt out of this discussion right now. I
Yeah.
can't change it.
Yep.
And I need to move on to feel better anyway.
Right. Right.
It's above me now. That's what I think in my head. Like, this is above me, dog. Like,
Yeah.
Somebody else going to have to step in
Yeah.
here.
Somebody else.
yeah.
Neil, I know you got to go. Thank you so much for the time today, but also for what you've committed to showing and not just telling, and the time I know time away from your family, time editing, time producing, time helping people. It's not your job to do that.
Right.
You give of yourself, and I'm just grateful to know you and to be your friend. And I've also been through airport security with Neil, and we talked about TSA pre. So I'm a happy TSA pre influencer to Neil at that point. But
Yeah.
our friendship over the years has brought so much good to my life, and I just appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man. You wrote an acknowledgement in that book for me, and your words mean so much because you're out there doing it too. Like I've just got so much respect for you and what you've done over time. I'm trying to show people it can be done. That's why I even wrote the book to begin with. Is you can do this. It's literally one day at a time. You just have to take it one day at a time. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. That was the whole goal for it, and I hope it helps.
Well, I appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day. And I cannot wait to release this episode.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
This is fun.
Thanks.
Hey.
You guys are awesome.
Mailbag
Mailbag
time.
Here's the mail. It never fails. Dun, 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 dun. We're just still workshopping this tune, guys. It's fine. It's
Yeah, we
fine.
gotta actually like put some real dedicated time to
I'm gonna get in my
lyrics
Quinta
writing.
Brunson. I'm gonna get in my Quinta Brunson and find a beat like from a song that we already really like. So don't be surprised if you guys get on here and it's like some Meek Mill. I'm just kidding. I am joking. Anyways, the mailbag.
I was just trying to have like a Meek Mill, like
Dreams and
my only
nightmares.
yeah, I was just
Yeah, you'd be like,
yeah.
the Cadillac
I
was
was
like
raised
Phantom.
I was raised by the stop sign. Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
Wale
um,
ambition plays. Oh my god.
wow, true. Wow, that's we're millennials now. Now everyone knows. Okay, the email, as always, is mailbag@diabeticsdoingthings.com. Today we're answering a question about foods that are difficult to dose for. So it's not just about the carbs, not just about the fat. It's all about timing. The popular ones. So the question here is the popular foods that people talk about having difficulty with are often pizza, pasta, chips and salsa at a Mexican restaurant, and Chinese food. What other foods do you guys find are difficult to count carbs for? And so for you and I, let's just talk about that. For me today, it's actually top of mind because I got my haircut today at lunch and I went to go grab a sandwich at a little bakery that's like kind of down the street from my barbershop. And they have a chicken salad sandwich that's made on a croissant. And it is unbelievably good. But if it was on like regular bread, like sourdough bread or something, I would know exactly how many carbs to dose for. But in the past, I've not given myself enough carbs or enough insulin for the spike from the carbs because there definitely are some. But then also croissant rolls are like, flaky and they fall apart and like they're really not that thick sometimes. And so how many carbs are in there? How much of it has been cut out to fill in the chicken salad? It's always a mystery to me. So today I'd rather be a little bit low than to go high. That's just my preference. So I kind of over bolused, over calculated. So
How big
still
was
learning,
how big was the
still learning.
croissant? Like, are we talking about like croissant like size of your head? Like how like what are we talking? Like
All right, I have a 40-pound head, so that's different for me. Sorry everybody. Now you know that a little bit about me. It was a large croissant, Texas size, but it was not the same size as my head. That would be a little bit
okay. No,
absurd.
I was trying to think because like a regular croissant, if you ask Google, producer job here, is 26 grams of carbs. So if we're thinking like a little bit of a larger than average, I'm thinking 34. What did you bolus for? How much did you bolus
So
for?
I bolus for 50 because there was, there's chicken salad. I thought there's grapes in the chicken salad. There's like probably some sugar in the mayonnaise, like, and it was a larger than average croissant. So I was like, okay, I'm going to over index for this a little bit and see what happens.
You're never allowed to bring chicken salad to my house, first of all, is what happens. Were you high? Were you low? What happened? with
I
your
went a little bit low. I also pre-bolus maybe too early, so that's sometimes a tricky thing too with, like, some of the faster insulins. Pre-bolusing is a little bit tricky. But yeah,
okay.
I'm 150 right now, and there's point 0.8 units on board, so
That's not
I
bad.
think I
That's
did okay.
yeah, that's totally you stuck that landing. Like you are standing straight up. That sounds good. No,
But I did have to eat a little bit of a I did have to eat a little bit of a snack before we recorded this interview just to because I was feeling sweaty and all
like
that.
how many like small like lots of gummies or like a juice box or like a little carby snack?
A few gummies, there's probably like 18
Okay.
carbs.
Okay. So like we had to do I feel like there was like a flag on the play. I don't know, I'm learning football terms. Anyways, the Taylor Swift effect. I'm just kidding. I hate her now. A food that is hard for me to dose for. I mean, I guess ethnic foods are really difficult. Like Mediterranean foods can kind of be hard. Like if you're thinking about like a hummus
Big
and
time.
like pita bread, right? Like the bread itself only has like the 30 carbs, but then like the hummus, like how many carbs was also
Yeah, hummus is
depends on
tough,
who made the hummus.
tabbouleh.
Like, did I buy it
Mhm.
from the store? Or is it like, did Sarah's mom make it? Or did my dad make it? Like, who made the hummus? How much olive oil did they put in it? Like, it's just that was hard. I would also say, like, if have you ever had Munsa? Okay.
Maybe we
Munsa
don't
is
make
the one where
I'm
there's
sure
like
we
a
don't make a lot of munsa at the How House, but I've eaten pretty
you
ethnic at
like you never
restaurants.
had Munsa, Retro, what are you talking about? No, you gotta tell your homie to have his wife make Munsa for you, but it's a Palestinian dish, and it's, like, chicken and, like, rice, and, like, they turn it over, and that's a hard one too because it's, like, you get the protein with the carb already, and the carb is kinda, like, distributed, and there's, like, nuts in there, so there's, like, random other things and that you're not maybe thinking about, so usually, what I do is I just think about that the size of your fist is 25 carbs if it's a cup of rice. Think about it that way. So I just like look at the food and I'm like, how much of this fits in my fist is like, you know? And then
The
I
size of your fist is 25 carbs.
exactly, dog. But you know what? Podcast about to find out. I have LeBron James hands. You know that, bro. I thought haven't I shown you me and Erica like did the thing and her hand was like that much smaller than mine. I have mess. I can palm a basketball, ladies and gentlemen. Anyways,
Incredible, incredible.
disgusting. Disgusting. I am LeBron James. Anyways, the point is here that I think ethnic foods is hard, especially if we're talking about like say you got to eat Ethiopian. Like, how would you dose for that? Have you ever had Ethiopian food? Like the
Mhm.
injera on the bottom, which is Eritrean food, the injera on the bottom is like this spongy texture. Bro, you're that is not a 30 carb thing. Like that's way less than
Yeah.
you. And then you've got all these vegetables that are in different stews, but like if you make Eritrean food, the meat that you put in the stew, like there's certain spices that go in there, but you also put other stuff like honey or cardamom or stuff that adds carbs to the food. So ethnic food is gonna be my answer.
One thing I would say though that I like about ethnic food is or, if it's Indian food and there's a lot of different things around, like, and you're adding to your plate, like, or you're eating tapas maybe, and there's a lot of different, like, little options, is that there's sort of always a good, like, fiber precursor. So, like, vegetables, like, I find when I'm eating either, like, family style or buffet style, if I can sort of create a some cushion for those carbs and that protein of some vegetables,
Okay.
some water. I think that's a big part of like when I strategize for pizza. I got to make sure that for every slice of pizza I eat, I'm taking down a whole glass of
I
water
have to
to
move with
help
the
with.
day. If I'm gonna have, like, a
Yeah,
lot of injera and a lot of rice and, like, a lot of dorowat and all this, like, Eritrean food, that's a day that I went for a walk. Like, I went for a walk that day. It's crazy to me
but
that that impacts my
that's
years later.
that's so interesting too because in those cultures they don't live the same way that we do.
We move
They're not
around a
as
lot.
sedentary,
Like, even
right?
in Mexico, when I'm
Walking.
eating Mexican food, like, it's because I just came back home from riding for, like, 6 hours and I, like, ran in a field and, like, I did all this movement, you know?
Yeah, so, like, those things, it's not all the same, and y we talked about this in this episode, but, like, what affects one person one way is not, not necessarily gonna affect another person the same way.
Well,
We all count our carbs differently, we all have different insulin sensitivity, we all have different factors like sleep, exercise, all those things that go into, like, the 42 factors or whatever, shout out to Adam Brown for those. It's
in
like,
my tribe.
yeah, there's so many other things in there that are causing that, or affecting that. And I think that was a big thing for me last year is understanding that my high blood sugars aren't because my diabetes is out of whack after I don't get any sleep, but it's because my body's out of whack after not getting sleep, whether I have diabetes or not. And so, that's something that, we
Mm,
really just have to take into equation is like, yeah, the standard American diet, if you look at like your typical tacos, rice and beans, like Mexican food dish, it doesn't fit those things because the lifestyle, like if you're going to be working all day and you're having a siesta and you have your lunch packed up and like you're going to open that up, you have a calorie deficit that you got to fill that you need long sustained energy for. So tortilla and beans and rice and meat is like a great fuel for that. But
Yeah.
not if you're sitting at your little desk like us.
No,
Eat your tacos and then you sit at your desk for like 4 hours. You're gonna have yourself a tough time. I don't care if you
I
have
don't know.
diabetes
My
or not.
takeaway here is because you were like, maybe if I'm not sleeping, if I'm not eating, so go back to your country, Eritrea. I need to return to my land. This is not for me. Because
Hey, you know what? I think about that all the
butcher
time.
in Mexico, and I have way better butchers than I'm in Egypt. Like, I hate it here.
Yeah, like people talk about this a lot online of like, oh, I went to Italy and I had wine and I didn't have a hangover. Well, it's because there's no preservatives in their wine. They didn't have to ship it overseas. So, my brother and I always talk about like if our family had never immigrated from Germany and the modern world had not developed, we would just be the guys swinging the hammer at the front of the barbarian village, and like that would be probably like yeah, our physiology is better suited to that than it is to sit at our little computers and tic tac type away.
I
Anyway,
thank God for that.
yeah, exactly. Now you guys know a little bit more about us.
Thank you for coming to the mailbag. This is an unhinged version of it. Please write in mailbag@diabeticsdoingthings.com. We will answer your questions or tell your anecdotes. We also, I think we can accept diabetes stories. If you have a crazy diabetes story, please send it in mailbag.
Bring us your diabetes drama. If you've experienced stigma, write in so we can talk about it. We can shade these people who are encountering you in the real world. I love diabetes drama. Share it with me. See you next time.